Good evening, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would review this little video today. And this video, once again, is going to pertain the hot topic at the current moment in time, Mr. Canelo Alvarez. And the reason why I thought that I would review this video is because this is actually going to be a channel, all in all, that I've very much liked to review over the years, or I've very much liked to watch his videos. And I'm sure actually a certain amount of my commentators or certain people that watch my channel who may be familiar with this channel, they may actually have wanted me to review one or two of his videos. Because, of course, this channel, in my opinion, he does tend to be one of the more realistic, certainly one of the more logical and objective channels out there. It doesn't mean that I agree with everything that he says, but what I will say is this. I would say that, me and this person right here, and just to reveal his name, this channel, of course, is known as Chronicles of Judo 144. And some people overall, may be aware of his channel. Some of you may not be. But for those of you, of course, that have not seen his content, I certainly suggest that you watch it. Once again, that doesn't mean that I agree with everything that he says. But when it comes to a certain amount of his sports analyzations or even analyzations on other topics, I would say that I would agree with him about on a good 85, maybe at the least 75% of what he has to say, which is pretty, a pretty decent percentage, because you're not going to find a lot of people, all in all, even, you can even have a best friend or a person that you're very close to, and you're not even going to agree on, 75 to 85% of things. But when it comes down to it, Chronicles of Judo 144, in my opinion, very decent YouTube channel at one point in time. Of course, he does not do YouTube videos anymore. He took it to the next level. I believe that he took his videos to Patreon, which, of course, is a paid platform. Of course, you can make money off of YouTube, but I believe Patreon, that's where you pay directly. So that's a little bit different. But, I thought that I would review this one video. This is a video that actually is on one of his two Patreon channels. I don't want to review too many of his videos from the Patreon channel because, of course, I don't want to be taking money out of the man's pocket or anything like that. And, of course, I don't want to be putting content out there, constantly from him where it will be from Patreon. So, of course, I would recommend that if you guys, of course, want to see his content, I don't believe that it's that much. I believe on Patreon it's only, one channel, I believe, if you want to see all topics, I think it's like $5 a month. Not too bad. Another one, it's only like $1, maybe $3 at most. So, depending on what you want to see, I think that it is worth it. If you're willing overall to, spare some of the change or spare, a few bucks, certainly it would be worth a watch. I heard Hatman Strikes Back, which is another great boxing channel as well. He also has a Patreon as well where he talks about certain things. Another great channel as well. And there's a few other ones that I can mention. But the majority of channels out there that I see, especially when they talk about boxing, because boxing is such a big, pro-racial sport, no matter overall, what demographic you're talking about. There's so much bias when it comes down to it. There's so many people all in all that, in my opinion, that their sense of realism is just completely, not there. But Chronicles of Judo 144, almost no matter what sport or no matter what he's talking about, his sense of realism, in my opinion, is usually there. Once again, that doesn't mean that I agree with everything that he says, but Chronicles of Judo 144, in my opinion, he certainly, all in all, in my opinion, has a good head upon his shoulders. So this video, in my opinion, actually is going to be quite a treat to review because, of course, not only do I think that he's always entertaining to watch, not only do I think that he has a very, very entertaining, platform, but when it comes down to it, he's going to be saying a lot of the same things that I've been saying about Mr. Canelo Alvarez for the past year and a half. Because once again, for those of us that are logical, realistic, and objective, and for those of us that really, really, really know what we're watching when we watch sports, we know that Canelo Alvarez, he is on a whole nother level. It just is what it is. Canelo Alvarez is one of those rare, once-in-a-lifetime generational talents. He has a non-for-real skill set, as what Judah would usually say. But anyways, when it comes down to it, let's get into this video. This is actually going to be his review of the Caleb Sweet Hands Plant versus Canelo Alvarez fight, which I thought was a very decent matchup. I thought that Caleb Plant, he gave it his best. I don't think that he always had the best strategy in terms of the fight. I thought that he stayed on the ropes a little bit too much. If you're going to face a Canelo Alvarez, and if you're not a person with A-grade power, and to be honest with you, Caleb Plant, I don't think that he has bad power. I just don't think that he has enough power to really hurt a Canelo Alvarez. If you're going to hurt a Canelo Alvarez with your power, you have to have you have to have A grade power. I mean, not even Gennady Golovkin could really shake, Canelo Alvarez that often. And Gennady Golovkin is what we would call, a massive puncher. But anyways, let's get into the video. I don't want to waste too much time with the intro. He's going to be talking about Mr. Saul Canelo Alvarez. He's also going to be talking about, in his opinion, how the Jamal Charlo fight would go, the Demetrius Boo Andrade fight would go, the David Benavidez fights. And in his opinion, will Canelo Alvarez eventually maybe become the greatest fighter of all time in terms of boxing history? And I've overall mentioned that a couple times as well, that I do believe that there is going to be a push for that, especially if Canelo, if he does face other fighters like Charlo, Benavidez, Beterbiev, Bivol, yada, yada, yada. And who knows, like I said, I would not be surprised if Canelo even tried to go up to heavyweight. Like I said, I'm not surprised at all. I think that boxing has a bunch of plans for Canelo. I would not be surprised whatsoever if he went up to cruiserweight and heavyweight. I would not be surprised at all, just to see, him give it an attempt. But we'll see what happens. But anyways, Mr. Chronicles of Judah 144, he's going to be speaking in this video. I'm going to let him talk, and I'm going to chime in when I need to. But let's get into it.
All right, man, peace. So, brothers, this video right here is going to be my evaluation, the post-fight evaluation of the Super Middleweight Championship bout that occurred last Saturday night between Mr. Caleb Sweet Hands Plant and Mr. Saul Canelo Alvarez. I stated before the fight that I believed that the bout would eventually end in a late round stoppage, somewhere between rounds 9 and 11, leaning towards round 11. And of course, that is what occurred because, to be quite frank, it's not.
I believe I had a similar prediction as well. And the reason why I had that prediction is because, first, when we talk about the Billy Joe Saunders fight, I actually did not believe that Canelo was going to knock out Billy Joe Saunders. Because Canelo, he's not usually a person that, at least in his biggest fights, he didn't really come across as a knockout artist. He didn't really knock out Golovkin. Of course, that wasn't really to be expected because Golovkin's a massive puncher and he has an A-grade chin. And it's very rare that you're going to see a fighter that is able to knock out a A-grade puncher, when it comes down to it, and someone who's highly skilled like a Gennady Golovkin. But he also wasn't able to knock out Danny Jacobs, who, I don't want to call him chinny, but he can be knocked down, he can be hurt. But he has stood the test of time within the past several years. So let me give Danny Jacobs some credit. Who else am I thinking of? He also did not knock out Araceli Lara, but of course, Lara, in my opinion, he's a rare, slick fighter that, you just don't want to fight. Very defensive. But I did not expect Canelo actually to knock out Billy Joe Saunders. But once I seen him knock out Billy Joe Saunders, a person, in my opinion, that I don't believe I've ever seen knocked down, at least in, my current years of watching him. And on top of that, usually someone who was very sturdy. Once I seen him break Billy Joe Saunders' orbital eye bone, I said, wow, yeah, he's probably going to knock out Caleb Plant somewhere probably within 8 to 11 rounds, I think is what I predicted. Or maybe I said 9 to 11, somewhere around there. But,
Not that difficult to prognosticate exactly how a fight is going to go once you come to understand fighters' styles, some of their idiosyncrasies, and some of the intangibles or lack thereof that either fighter tends to have. When it comes to Caleb Sweet Hands Plant, I stated...
Well, I would somewhat agree with that, but I think that the reason why this fight was easier to predict than some of the other fights, when it comes down to it, say like an Anthony Joshua versus Alexander Usyk, in my opinion, is because, this wasn't really a 50-50 fight. Now, some people, I don't know, they'll take a look at it and they'll say, oh, well, is that you saying that Canelo's facing weak competition? Not at all. But like I said, there's a reason why I have Canelo as my number one pound-for-pound fighter. There's no other fighter in the world today that is so ahead of his other contemporaries. Like I said, unless we're talking about an Artur Beterbiev or Dimitri Bivol, there's no other fighters on the planet, in my opinion, that can even be somewhat relatively similar in size to Canelo to where, they would be 50-50 fights. In fact, to be quite honest with you, if we're talking about the 160, even if you want to, talk about the 154-pound division, if you want to talk about 154 all the way up to 200 pounds of cruiserweight or whatever the limit is now, I heard they changed it to 190, but I'm not really sure how true that is. Maybe that's just with the WBC. I don't know. There's only one fighter on planet Earth that I would favor over Canelo Alvarez right now from those weight divisions. That's Mr. Alexander Usyk. That would be it.
What I believed he needed to do in order to win the fight, and he was unable to do that. Unfortunately, earlier in the bout, he started to allow himself to be trapped in the corners or on the ropes, and he took way too much damage. You could tell somewhere around rounds 3, 4, and 5.
I agree with that completely. And I said that in my fight review that Caleb Plant, in my opinion, he actually did a very poor job staying on the ropes way too long. If you're going to face Canelo Alvarez, and if you're a person that, you try to implement that Floyd Mayweather Jr. or Araceli Lara style, that defensive style basically is what I'm saying, that's good. But, if you're not a person with A-grade power that can keep Canelo off of you at times, You have to, or not a person with a great power. You have to move constantly. You have to use your feet constantly. You have to move around constantly. And Caleb Plant, not only was he tying up Canelo, in my opinion, in a very poor way, because he was only holding on to one arm, which would let Canelo Alvarez pretty much beat the crap out of him overall up against the ropes. I don't know who taught him that move, because it was not the most intelligent move, in my opinion. But when it comes down to it, he just stayed in the corner way too long. It's okay to stay up against the ropes for a couple seconds, maybe block a shot, but then you gotta try to counter, or you gotta try to get out of there. One thing about Lara and Mayweather is that they're constantly moving. It just is what it is.
That he was starting to feel the body attack from Canelo Alvarez. He was just trying to keep it together. And as the fight went on, you could see him incrementally wearing down round by round because he didn't truly have enough belief in himself and in his power to stand his ground in the middle of the ring and make Canelo respect not only him as a boxer, but him as a fighter. Now, I'm sure that many of you brothers out there may have caught, and I might include that in this video, I'm sure that many of you brothers out there may have caught the little snippet of the bout in which Caleb, quote-unquote, Sweet Hands Plant, is trying to gain validation from Canelo. I think that is somewhere in round 9, where a ringside observer happened to catch Canelo Plant talking to Saul Canelo Alvarez, or really I should say they were talking to one another. And Caleb basically was trying to get Canelo to acknowledge that he was, quote-unquote, a good fighter. If you're trying to do...
I agree. And, Judah, he's going to state it within the next minute, but in my opinion, if you do that, what that basically means is that either A, you didn't really have a whole bunch of belief in yourself going into this fight that you were going to beat Canelo, or B, you maybe thought that you had a chance heading into the fight, but once, you really seen what Canelo Alvarez was about and what all he had and what tools he had at his disposal and his power, you said, wow, I can't beat this dude. This dude is just too powerful. He's just too good. It just is what it is.
That you have no plans on winning the fight.
I agree.
And I think that it's because Caleb could feel that he was going to get stopped. He was going to get knocked out, and he was not going to make it all 12 rounds. Because if you really feel like you're going to make it all 12 rounds, you're not asking the quote-unquote incumbent champion, even though you yourself are a champion, you're not asking him for validation. You're not asking him.
I agree, because that's not what Floyd Mayweather Jr. did. That's not what Arasani Lara did. That's not what Gennady Golovkin did. Now, in my opinion, does, that mean that Caleb Plant is on, he's so much more, lower than them? Well, he's obviously lower than a Floyd Mayweather Jr. and a Gennady Golovkin, in my opinion. And I would say that in terms of skills, he probably is lower than an Arasani Lara. But what I will say is this: Caleb Plant, in my opinion, he is a clear A-grade fighter. Very, very decently slick, very fast hands. I actually don't think that he has as bad a power as what people say, but like I said, to have power to hurt Canelo Alvarez, you have to be on like that Danny Jacobs, Gennady Golovkin level. Like, you have to have a great power, man. Canelo Alvarez is one of the best chins that I personally ever seen in boxing history.
If you're good for a fighter who only has quote-unquote 21 fights. I mean, I have news for you, Caleb Plant. You're not 21, 22 years old. You're 29 years old. That's as good as Caleb Plant is ever going to be. I'm not trying to say that he's never going to win.
I agree.
Another belt. Because Canelo could possibly move up in weight. I doubt that he's going to. But he could possibly move up in weight to 175 and try.
That's one point where I'll actually have to disagree with Judah. I don't doubt that Canelo Alvarez is going to... I don't think that he's thinking twice about it. I think that he eventually will go up to 175. He's already fought people that have somewhat of their stature. He already fought Sergey Kovalev. He already fought Callum Smith, who, to be honest with you, he's probably a natural 175-pounder. And I think that's why Canelo was going after Ilunga Makabu next, because Makabu is a cruiserweight. He's probably naturally slightly bigger than what some of those bigger heavyweights are, and he has a very, very good punch. But from what I'm hearing, we may see Canelo versus Jamal Charlo. So we'll see what happens.
To unify the light heavyweight.
That's why I say I don't really have a problem with the Makabu fight next. Not only is it a chase for history and an opportunity for Canelo to become one of the only people who won belts from 154 all the way up to cruiserweight. I mean, how many fighters can we really think have done that? But, like I said, that would almost be like kind of like the Roy Jones Jr. accomplishment. But when it comes down to it, like I said, Makabu would get him adjusted to some of the real deal light heavyweights. I'm talking about the Artur Beterbiev and the Dimitri Bivols, the guys that very decently skilled for those divisions. And, like I said, Artur Beterbiev, his punching power, especially his punching power, is like dangerous. Like people have literally retired because his punching power hurt them so bad. Like that one very good fighter with the good amateur and Olympic pedigree, Alexander Vozdik, I believe, that one Ukraine fighter, the dude who knocked out Adonis Stevenson and forced Adonis Stevenson to retire. You know, that dude's punching power, it literally forces you to basically surrender.
The weight division as well. I think that he understands that in order for him to make a case as the quote-unquote greatest fighter of all time, he is eventually going to have to move up in weight to 175 and try.
I agree. And I've been saying this overall for the past, few videos. When it comes down to it, there is going to be a push for Mr. Saul Canelo Alvarez to eventually be the greatest fighter of all time. And that's why Mayweather is saying a certain amount of things that he's saying about Canelo. Because he realizes that, it is what it is. Now, eventually, in my opinion, like I said, will Canelo ever be definitively above a Floyd Mayweather Jr., or definitively the greatest boxer of all time? I don't know if I would say that, but he can at least be in the conversation. Like I said, he'll be, Canelo definitely has a very, very decent chance to eventually be in the top 10, top 5 one day. No doubt about it.
To get all of the belts up there, or maybe move back down to 160 and try to get all the belts down there, or maybe do both. Because if Canelo is able to consolidate all of the championship belts in the middleweight division and also in the light heavyweight division, after already doing so in the super middleweight division, he will definitely be able to make a case for him being the quote-unquote greatest fighter of all time, if he can do that. Now, would I ever co-sign on that? No. But if he...
Yes, and I had a feeling that he would say that because Judah, I believe, he believes that Floyd Mayweather Jr. is the greatest fighter of all time just in terms of skills and dominance, and I do get that.
If he were to do that, that would definitely make him top 5 all time, beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Well, it certainly will put him in my top 10. What I'll say is this, Canelo, like I said, to me right now, he's on that Andre Ward, Joe Calzaghe, Bernard Hopkins level. To be honest with you, he's probably even slightly ahead of them, and I don't discredit any of those fighters, even for them only becoming champions in 2 weight divisions. But Canelo, when you just take a look at him, in my opinion, like I said, right now he's about on that level. I do need to see if he can defeat the 175-pounders, and also, Charlo Benavidez, like I said, maybe Andre as well. Like I said, I don't think that those fighters, I don't think that they're really above some of the other contenders that Canelo has already fought. But like I said, being an all-time great fighter, consistency is key,
Now, where do I rank Canelo as of right now? I'll probably save that for later in this video. But just getting back to the...
Canelo, in my opinion, once again, like I stated, he's within my top 30 to top 25 all time, at the least. Like I said, if we're just comparing him to other Mexican fighters or other Latino fighters, in my opinion, he's greater than a Juan Manuel. Like when you talk about all the Mexican fighters that came out of the 2000s and, were kind of getting older by the 2010s or, the 90s heading into the 2000s and then the 2010s, like when you talk about Marquez, Barrera, Morales, all those guys, he's above all those guys. It just is what it is. Once again, that's why every single one of those guys, they're acting like a bunch of little salty ass hoes. It just is what it is. And they're insulting Canelo Alvarez, every chance they get, because they know that Canelo Alvarez has already surpassed them in most people's eyes. And he has. They would be right to say, they would be correct, because Canelo is better than those fighters. He's greater than those fighters. It just is what it is.
Evaluation of the fight. I thought that Caleb fought a very good fight. But fighting a very good fight for a fighter on the level of a Caleb Plant is not good enough to win. And at the end of the day, you want to win unless you're just there for the payday. And that will be evaluated somewhere down the line when it comes to Caleb Plant. Did he really step into the ring wanting to win? Or did he just step into the ring for a payday? Or did he step into the ring wanting to win, and then the reality of what he got himself caught up in, it really woke him up in regards to what level he's on, and he decided midway through the fight that he just wanted to make a good show of it and collect his paycheck. Because that happens to good fighters when they face great fighters. They say to themselves, you know what? I thought I had a chance before the fight, but it's different once you get into the ring with a great fighter. And it's something that Canelo had to learn when he...
I agree. And I've seen it with certain fighters when they're in the ring. I remember when Guillermo Rigondeaux, who was always a very supremely confident fighter, he got in the ring with Vasyl Lomachenko and he quit. he quit against Vasily Lomachenko. Excuse me, that he was so embarrassed that he got his ass whooped in that fight. Judah also made a very good video about that. Of course, that fight now happened about how long ago was that fight? Like 4 or 5 years ago now. Maybe 3 years ago. I can't remember. But when it comes down to I've seen certain fighters, even great fighters, they get in the ring and they're like, wow, this dude is just on a whole nother level. I just can't get past this guy.
Got into the ring with Floyd Mayweather, and it's something now that Canelo is, fully matured and understanding on how to dismantle certain type of fighters. We see that same dynamic with Canelo and other fighters. Now, do I think that Canelo's career is totally on the up and up? No, I do not. We all know that there have been allegations and also proof of quote-unquote performance-enhancing drugs. So that is something that is going to dog Canelo throughout the course of his career, no matter how.
Let me talk about that real quick because I've stated a certain amount of things as well. Do I believe that Canelo more than likely is on PEDs? Yes, I do. It just is what it is. But like I said, to me, that's not really a big deal because I believe that there's been a certain amount of fighters, and I believe that there's a certain fighters now that are on PEDs anyway. So it just is what it is. Like I said, it's just so hard to prove, who isn't on PEDs and who is on PEDs. And if I'm going to, basically tear down Canelo Alvarez because at one point in time he was on PEDs or because he's very possibly still on PEDs, when it comes down to it, that would mean that, in my opinion, that Manny Pacquiao is not an all-time great fighter. Or that I would have to rank him lower just because he was on PEDs. And I'm just not sure if I can do that because, like I said, once again, I don't know which of these fighters are on PEDs or not. I'm a believer that a lot of these guys are on PEDs. Juan Manuel Marquez was on PEDs at one point in time, I believe. There's a possibility that Miguel Cotto at one point in time was on PEDs. All those fighters, in my opinion, all-time great fighters.
How skilled a fighter he is. Because no matter what people want to admit, acknowledge, or respect, when Canelo got into the ring with Floyd Mayweather, he looked like a fighter who was dead tired after around round 4 or 5. There's no doubt in my mind that the fully random blood and urine testing had an impact on Mr. Canelo.
Well, it could have been that, but let me also state this. There was a weight drain for that fight. There was a rehydration clause. So it could have also been that a little bit as well. I don't think that he's ever been drained, or all in all that there's ever been a rehydration clause. And we all know that Canelo, that he balloons up, very, very massively. So it is what it is. Certain people have talked about his stamina and they say, they may ask me, well, do you think the PEDs, if you think he's allegedly on PEDs, do you think that has improved his stamina? I'm sure it has a bit. But what I will say about Canelo is this. What I noticed in his fights actually is that I think that he paces himself better. And you notice that with certain fighters. Canelo is never going to have an A-grade gas tank. He's just never had that. And I still don't think he has an A-grade gas tank, to be quite honest with you. But Canelo Alvarez, I think that he paces himself better. The shots that he lands now, he's just so much more accurate than what he used to be, in my opinion. And that's why, in my opinion, it could be the PEDs. It certainly could be. But I think that he also paces himself better. What does that mean? It means that you know when to punch. It means overall you know how much to give it. It means you know how much power to put into whatever shots that you're putting into. Because not every shot needs to be, 80% power, 70% power each and every time.
Alvarez. But just getting back to his abilities and his skills as a fighter. As I stated in my preview of the fight, Canelo reminds me of an amalgamation of different fighters. And there were certain dudes who, kind of took offense to some of the evaluations that I made about Canelo Alvarez. And there's nothing to get offended by when I say that Canelo, to a degree, reminds me of Rocky Marciano. Rocky Marciano is a fighter who many times does not receive his respect from quote-unquote boxing fans.
No, he doesn't. And the main reason why, let's be real, is because he's a Caucasian. It just is what it is. And I'm not one of these guys to, claim, the race card with, any demographics when it comes down to it. But let's be real. A lot of people take a look at Rocky Marciano, or they'll take a look at certain athletes back then, like a Jerry West or, someone like that, and they'll say, oh, well, those guys, they weren't really that good. They just, were facing weak competition. No, those guys, they were very good for their, for their day. Now, if you're talking about someone like, a Sullivan, back in the day, then I would somewhat understand. Or if you're talking about a person to where they fought nothing but, just complete Caucasians and, they didn't face any of the other demographics because the sport didn't allow them in there, that would be understandable. Rocky Marciano was not in that generation. He was in the same generation pretty much as Joe Louis. He was a little bit after Joe Louis, Joe Louis always gets this maximum amount of credit. Here's the fact. These are the facts. Joe Louis lost to one of the black fighters that Rocky Marciano was able to knock out. All right, I believe that he either lost to Ezzard Charles or he lost to Jersey Joe Walcott. I can't remember which one, but he was able to lose the decision of that. Rocky Marciano knocked that dude out. All right, so it is what it is. So at the end of the day, whether you believe Joe Louis was more skilled than Rocky Marciano, at the end of the day, this is how my list works. I think Judah, like I said, very logical and very objective. His list is a little bit different than mine. He ranks his list more off of skill, and I certainly can appreciate that. But mine is a little bit more also about how impactful you were. Because to me, winning, by whatever means necessary, is more important at the end of the day than skill. Because people can take a look at a fighter and believe that he's more skilled than this guy, and this guy. That's cool, but if you can't win the fight, what does it mean? It doesn't matter. So Rocky Marciano, he always has to be above Joe Louis, in my opinion. Doesn't matter how skilled you believe Joe Louis was. He was not as great as Rocky Marciano.
But from his peers and from the people who grew up during his time period of dominance in the heavyweight division, he gets nothing but respect. When you listen to what Sugar Ray Robinson said about Rocky Marciano, when you listen to what Floyd Patterson said about Rocky Marciano, when you listen to what Muhammad Ali said about Rocky Marciano, please keep in mind that Marciano was the heavyweight champion of the world when Ali started boxing as an amateur. Muhammad Ali was a very big Rocky Marciano fan as a child. When you listen to what Archie Moore said about...
That's true. And a lot. Rocky Marciano was a person that is known for, I believe it was Jersey Joe Walcott. If it wasn't Jersey Joe Walcott, then it was Ezzard Charles. But Ezzard Charles, one of those guys, whichever one it was, but one of those guys, they would talk about Rocky Marciano and they would explain how great of an athlete that he actually was. And they said it wasn't really just the power of Rocky Marciano, but he would never stop punching. This dude's conditioning. There's certain people out there that they have gas tanks to where it's almost unreal. to where it's almost just, they just never get tired. They can go for miles upon miles upon miles in terms of jogging or running. Like certain fighters today, like a Terrence Bud Crawford. When I take a look at Terrence Bud Crawford is one of those fighters where he just has like an unlimited gas tank. Another person that has an unlimited gas tank, Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury, I don't think I've ever seen him legitimately get so dog-ass tired in one of his fights. And he's fought, Deontay Wilder and Vladimir Klitschko. There's certain fight, Vasily Lomachenko is another one that has excellent stamina as well. All those fighters that I just mentioned, excellent stamina. They could go for hours upon hours upon hours.
Rocky Marciano or Joe Louis.
And Rocky Marciano was one of those guys as well.
Rocky Marciano was a fighter who, from the outside looking in, he looks crude and awkward. But when you get into the ring with him and you understand the level of power, determination, and doggedness and his level of conditioning, you learn a new level of respect for him. And as he went along, he became more skilled. Now, is he anywhere near as skilled as Canelo? No. But Rocky Marciano being a very short fighter with short arms.
That's a great point as well. Rocky Marciano was a person that had a Miguel Cotto-like reach. What does that mean? He had a 67-inch arm reach. He has the shortest reach known overall in heavyweight history, at least out of any of the elite, champions. So a certain amount of people, they'll try to discredit his career and they'll say, oh, well, Rocky Marciano, he was only, knocking out natural light heavyweights. Rocky Marciano was a natural light heavyweight. Rocky Marciano was not, someone that today would be classified as a heavyweight. His natural, weight when he rehydrates, he's about 187, 188 pounds. He was never that big. Like I said, a lot of these guys, they really need to know what the hell they're talking about. Because they'll take a look at Joe Louis and they'll say, oh man, Joe Louis was one of the all-time great fighters. Rocky Marciano was greater than Joe Louis. When you take a look at Joe Louis, he especially had trouble with some of the elite black fighters of his day. It just is what it is. People always want to talk shit about Rocky Marciano and say, oh, well, Rocky Marciano, he didn't defeat anyone but weak-ass competition. Joe Louis defeated the same exact competition, bruh. In fact, actually, he couldn't even defeat some of the same competition because when he fought that Ezzard Charles or Jersey Joe Walcott, he lost to one of them by decision. Rocky was able to knock him out. So it is what it is.
He had to develop that deep crouch so that he can get on the inside against taller fighters like Ezzard Charles.
Yes, develop that jab when it came down to it overall, kind of like Mike Tyson.
Very skilled fighters like Jersey Joe Walcott. And that's why he was able to...
Jersey Joe Walcott, who I believe had like a 10-inch reach advantage over Rocky Marciano, by the way.
To be victorious over those fighters. Not saying that his quote-unquote competition was the best or anything of that sort. But you see that same mentality amongst great fighters who are shorter. And Canelo Alvarez, although way more skilled than Rocky Marciano, he has a very similar mentality in that he wants to stalk you and break you down. And he did a great job of doing that against Caleb, quote-unquote, Sweet Hands Plant. That same mentality like a Joe Frazier, like a Rocky Marciano, like a Mike Tyson. Shorter fighters who had to get on the inside and wear you down.
Agreed.
Canelo Alvarez, he has that ability. He does not have great feet, but he's great defensively.
I would somewhat agree with that. I would say that Canelo, the only problem, in my opinion, the only weakness that he has really within his skill set is that sometimes he does not tend to have the fastest feet, and sometimes he can be a little bit flat-footed. But besides that, every other place, Canelo is A grade. Punching power, hand speed, chin, when it comes down to it, head movement, it just is what it is.
Been able to adapt certain
Defense.
components of Floyd Mayweather.
Like I said, there's no better defensive fighter today than Saul Canelo Alvarez. You can't name me one. Maybe Alexander Usyk, but I'm not even sure about Usyk.
Their style.
And someone mentioned Terrence Bud Crawford. I like Terrence Crawford a lot. I don't think he's even the defensive fighter that Canelo Alvarez is. When I see him in some of his fights, he just gets hit way too often.
And mixing it with his own.
And he will have to watch out, with that when it comes to the Errol Spence Jr. fight.
Own style. His counters are meant to be far more damaging than Floyd Mayweather's were to a degree. Even though there are many Floyd Mayweather fights where he fought a lot like what Canelo Alvarez gets credit for. The roll and catch, hold your ground style in the middle of the ring, where you want to make your opponent pay every time they throw a blow and they miss. We saw that in the bouts that Floyd had against Victor Ortiz, against Shane Mosley, to a degree against Miguel Cotto, even though that Miguel Cotto fight was very damaging to Floyd body-wise, and he had to adapt. The Miguel Cotto fight is the main reason why Floyd decided to change trainers. Because his uncle, Roger...
Let me talk on that as well. Because you got a lot of these channels when it comes down to like Dante's, Boxing Nation when it comes down to it, that hate Canelo Alvarez. And let's be real, once again, they're pretty much a pro-black cult. It just is what it is. Like I said, people may get offended to it, by it, but that's just what they are. It is what it is. He basically says, oh, well, Floyd was able to whoop Canelo's ass at 36 years old. Can you imagine what he would have done to him if he would have been Pretty Boy Floyd when he was younger? Let me tell you what, that version of Floyd Mayweather Jr. that Canelo Alvarez fought, you can debate that was the best version of Floyd Mayweather Jr. because, like I said, that was a more experienced Floyd Mayweather Jr. That was a person, all in all, that still was very quick, still had a bit of punching power when it came down to it. And he was more defensive at that point in time. He was more defensively responsible at that point in time than what he was several years ago. So that version of Floyd, actually, you can debate, although not as powerful, maybe not as fast as what Pretty Boy Floyd was, you can actually argue that he was more intelligent, that he was a smarter fighter, harder to hit.
Kept telling him to be aggressive and to try to walk Miguel Cotto down, and Floyd did not feel like that style was working. And he had to move and utilize certain tactics on the fly, like the overhand right, the lead right hook, things of that sort, to pull the victory out because he was getting hurt very badly to the body.
He was getting very hurt in general. Miguel Cotto ain't nothing to fuck around with when he was at his peak, And, it's so funny, how a lot of these guys, like I said, some of these boxing channels that tend to be very, very biased, they always have to say with Canelo that, oh, he picks and chooses his fights. He only faces guys that have knockout losses or this and this and that. But they never say that shit with Mayweather. They never say that by the time he fought Miguel Cotto, he already had 2 knockout losses. By the time he fought Zab Judah, he had multiple knockout losses, I believe, when it came down to it. By the time he fought Shane Mosley, he was coming off of a very, very decent win, but he already had multiple losses. My point is this. If I really, really, really was someone that, say, for example, hated Floyd Mayweather Jr., and if I really wanted to tear down his career, I could say all this shit. Oh, he only fought Marquez when he was, had multiple losses. Oh, he only fought Miguel Cotto when he was washed up and had a couple losses. Oh, he fought Ricky Hatton, but Ricky Hatton was the same size. I can make all the excuses that I want to. But at the end of the day, like I said, when you really take a look at it realistically, Floyd beat a lot of fighters when they were pretty much at the best point in their career. It's the same thing with Canelo.
Trying to walk.
Does that mean that I think that both of those fighters beat everyone at the best point in their career? No. You have certain fighters like Oscar De La Hoya that, in my opinion, he was a bit older. And with Canelo, of course, you had Sergey Kovalev, who, had been knocked out twice, but he still was a champion. One of the best at 175. But,
Miguel Cotto down. That's why he replaced Roger with his father, because he realized he had to be more defensive as he got older, and that, that stand your ground style, especially for a fighter who's not a one-punch knockout fighter, can be very dangerous. Now, Canelo has, he has greater natural power than Floyd. So that style is more suitable for him, and you can see over the course of his fight against Caleb Plant that he was wearing Caleb down. And Caleb did not have the courage or the willingness to stand his ground early and gain Canelo's respect as a power puncher in the middle of the ring. Because a lot of power is just your willingness to commit. Now, don't get it twisted. Power is a gift, but it can be improved and developed, and also a lot of it is just your willingness to commit to your punches.
I agree. And Caleb Plant, he actually doesn't have bad power in my opinion, but he doesn't have the power to compete with Canelo. And I do agree with Judah that he did lose confidence as the fight was going along.
Caleb is a defense-first fighter. So every time he throws a shot, he's thinking about getting back in defensive position as opposed to committing to his blows. In order to defeat Canelo, he needed to have a mentality that he was going to try to break Canelo down early by doing something that Canelo did not expect. When Cassius Clay fought Sonny Liston, and I may have mentioned this in the preview video for the Canelo Alvarez versus Caleb Plant fight, when Cassius Clay fought Sonny Liston, he alternated between moving around the ring and standing his ground, to the point where he hit Sonny Liston with so many hard blows that after the fight, Sonny Liston said, "They lied to me. This kid could punch." Caleb had to show that he was willing to do that. In order to beat a great fighter, you have to do things that you've never done before and be willing to take the damage.
I agree. Like I said, and I said this recently with one of my Vasily Lomachenko videos, you have to risk it to take the biscuit. It just is what it is, as some of those people would say. The newer saying, I believe, actually, or maybe that's quite an old saying. I'm not sure how long that's been around. But you have to risk it basically to get the biscuit, or, fortune favors the bold. An older saying. But when it comes down to it, like I said, like when it came to Vasily Lomachenko against Teofimo Lopez, the reason why he lost that fight. Now, some people have alleged that his shoulder was injured. Maybe it was. I don't know. But at the end of the day, I didn't hear too much about it before the fight. I don't want to hear anything about it after. But the reason why Vasily Lomachenko lost that fight is because he was not willing to risk it to take the biscuit. I understand that Teofimo Lopez has a great power, and you're a guy that, you're not necessarily someone that handles 135 extremely well in terms of the power and in terms of overall their statures at times. But, if you were going to win that fight, you have to get in there. And it's the same thing with Canelo. If you're a person that is ever going to beat Canelo, sometimes you're going to have to take a punch to give one. Or sometimes you're going to have to go in there and really, land on your punches, put your feet into it, put your hip into it. When it comes down to it, put some edge into those punches. Sometimes you're going to have to be willing to exchange with a Saul Canelo Alvarez, and Caleb Plant, he was not really willing to do that.
Caleb was not willing to take the risks or the damage. And I think that
Agreed.
He was in great condition, but he was not in great enough condition to win that fight. If you're going to move, you have to be able to move for the entire fight. You have to have that.
I agree. And maybe that was conditioning, or maybe that was just because Caleb Plant did not have the boxing IQ. The only fighter that has ever fought Canelo Alvarez that was able to move the whole entire time, at least completely on the back foot, was Sonny Lara. And even he overall ran out of stamina a little bit against Canelo Alvarez.
Level of control over your body that in round 12, you can do what you could do back in round 1. You could summon your body to move whenever you needed to move, and your reflexes are still there. I said that's the condition that Floyd Mayweather was in his bout against Canelo. That's the condition that Floyd Mayweather was in his bout against Miguel Cotto. And that's the reason why he was able to last deep into fights, despite oftentimes taking punishment to the body early or in the middle of the fight. And Caleb did not have that ability. From round 3, round 4, when I saw he started to rest on the ropes or allow himself to get trapped in the corner, I said either he's utilizing the wrong game plan, because, sometimes cats do that because they want dudes to open up. Maybe they can catch him with a counter, a quick uppercut or something like that, especially out of the Philly shell. They want to try to catch you with the counter right uppercut or something like that if you open up too much. Or maybe, a counter left hook or something like that, and then try to escape from the corner. But Caleb wasn't built for all that because Canelo didn't respect him. He was supposed to establish a level of respect for his power early in the fight, and then move around, and then stop when he wanted to, and once again establish, the geography of the fight in the middle of the ring. Not get caught on the ropes. And he just got broke down over the course of the fight. I thought that it was a very good performance from Caleb. As I stated before the fight,
Well, I thought that it was I thought that it was a valiant effort. Like I said, he won about 3, maybe, if you were super generous, 4 rounds. But Caleb did, like I said, he just fought way too defensive. There's no problem with fighting defensively, but if you're facing a great fighter with Canelo Alvarez, even someone that maybe could be better with the feet, but actually has gotten faster, in my opinion, as time has gone along with his feet. When it comes down to it, you have to be moving constantly. And I just don't see another fighter out there. Maybe Demetrius Andre, but
very talented natural boxer. He's one of the elite level natural boxers on the planet Earth. And one of the better practitioners.
You hear that? He basically said, all in all, that Caleb Plant is one of the more elite level boxers on planet Earth. That is exactly what I've been saying overall about Canelo Alvarez's last couple of opponents. All right? It is what it is. So all these people, like I said, and I'm not just some Canelo Alvarez fanboy, but like I said, it's so obnoxious to hear these narratives from some of these dumbass boxing channels who have no idea what the hell they're talking about, like Dante's Boxing Nation or Boxing Ego say, oh, Caleb Plant was a cherry pick. Dude, you have no idea what the hell you're talking about. But it just is what it is.
Of the Mayweather style on the planet Earth. To be honest with you, I can't think of another quote-unquote white boy who can box that well in the quote-unquote black American style.
I agree, at least from America.
I give him a lot of credit. But it's going to be very interesting to see where his career goes from here. There were some people who got...
I'm not sure if Caleb Plant all in all is going to become champion again or not. We'll see. I don't know. The way that he got knocked out in that fight, I think that prior to this, had he been in a fight with David Benavidez or maybe Jamal Charlo, even Demetrius Andre, there's a possibility that Caleb Plant could have won any of those fights. But he didn't just get knocked out against Canelo. He got he got overall completely knocked out in this fight. Like he was knocked out bad. I mean, I guess it wasn't to the degree to where Deontay Wilder got knocked out against Tyson Fury or anything. It wasn't like when Roy Jones Jr. knocked out Montel Griffin in the rematch, or I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think of a fight where it was a real championship fight, and the person just didn't get up from the 10 count. But I can't think of any at the current moment in time. I guess Amir Khan versus Canelo Alvarez, but Amir Khan really ain't on that high of a level. But when it comes down to it, like I said, Caleb Plant, he got very thoroughly hurt in this fight. I would be very surprised if he ever won a belt again.
Got offended by some...
Same thing with Billy Joe Saunders.
But the implications that I made pertaining to the quote-unquote European champions that Canelo had defeated. Well, now we're going to get the opportunity to see, or most likely get the opportunity to see, exactly where Caleb fits amongst those European fighters. Because I can see him having bouts with those fighters in an attempt to maybe contend for one of those belts should Canelo decide to, move up in weight or move down in weight. We'll see.
I don't even know if some of those fighters are going to fight again. I mean, Callum Smith, he's fighting again after he got his ass whooped. But, Callum Smith, he's already facing at 175 because he's pretty much a natural light heavyweight anyway. Dude is like, 6'2" with a 8-inch reach advantage over Canelo Alvarez, I think. And on top of that, that dude has legitimate A-grade power. That dude, a lot of people actually don't know how powerful Callum Smith is. Callum Smith is a dude that can punch. It just is what it is. Billy Joe Saunders, I don't even know if he's going to be able to fight again. I mean, he has a broken orbital eye bone, and every person that I've seen have a broken orbital eye bone, whether it be Kell Brook or Alfredo Ngulu or Antonio Margarito or, several other fighters that I can probably mention, but I'm just not thinking of right now. Every fighter that I've seen, have a broken orbital eye bone, they were never the same ever again.
I can also see Canelo Plant becoming a super middleweight version of a Danny Garcia or an Adrian Broner. A fighter who has a name and who Al Heyman tries to protect and establish a little niche for him because, he has...
Well, in my opinion, Danny Garcia and Adrian Broner, I don't know if I would... I get the comparison, but Danny Garcia, in my opinion, has to be in a different league compared to Adrian Broner. Because Danny Garcia actually has some decent wins in his career, like over Lucas Matisse, who, in my opinion, was always a little bit, overstated, but he still was a very decent fighter. He also has a win over Lamont Peterson, who was very good at one point in time, and of course Amir Khan. So Danny Garcia and Adrian Broner, I think they're in completely different leagues. But I understand what he's saying. Someone who would lose some of the more bigger fights in his career, but when he faces B and C grade competition, he can beat him.
As appeal, he has charisma, and you can have him fight 2 or 3 bums, build his name back up, build his quote-unquote clout back up, and then eventually put him in there against someone who can really fight to test him again. At the end of the day, Caleb Plant, he does have to prove himself. He does have to, run the gamut. Because even though he beat Uzcategui, a lot of the glamour,
I actually don't know how to pronounce that dude's name. I think it's Uzcategui, that one Venezuelan fighter, Jose Uzcategui. And he looked pretty impressive against him. Is the only thing that I would say about Caleb Plant is that he doesn't necessarily have a great defense. He does get hit a little bit too often, especially in the latter part of the fight. His defense actually was very tip-top shape against Canelo, though, in my opinion. The only problem is that he was just staying in the corner too long. You can't do that.
The glitz has come off of Uzcategui now that it's been revealed that he was a PED user. But due to the fact that Caleb was able to last deep into the fight against Canelo, that also is going to build up a lot of his, his quote-unquote clout, his quote-unquote equity in the boxing world. So we'll see. We're going to learn a lot about Caleb now as he heads into his early 30s. What type of decisions is he going to make when it comes to, his opponents? So what's next for Canelo? Pretty much Canelo, he can do whatever he wants to do. Most likely he'll end up fighting Jermall Charlo or the kid Benavidez.
I thought that was very potentially going to happen as well. And if he does face Jermall Charlo next, he's probably going to go after David Benavidez next as well, because Canelo has expressed interest in those fights. Like I said, the only fighter that he hasn't really expressed interest in is Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade. And I get it.
I think that either fight is going to be very, very entertaining. I don't think that Charlo is going to necessarily last very long with Canelo, because I don't think that Jermall Charlo has the footwork or the skills to last very long with Canelo. It's probably.
I've been saying the same shit, Judah. Preach. Preach. I've been saying the same shit for years, and I have these certain dudes, these Jermall Charlo fans, and these dudes from these pro-black cults coming after my ass and saying all in all, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. Jermall Charlo is the best fighter, besides Triple G that Canelo's going to face. Dude, you have no idea what the hell you're talking about. Don't get me wrong. Who knows? Maybe I could be proved wrong. I don't mind eating crow, but I just don't see it.
It'll be a firefight, and the only hope that Jermall Charlo has is that he can hurt Canelo before Canelo hurts him.
We'll see, because Jermall Charlo, I've never actually seen him legitimately hurt in a fight. At least not too badly. But Canelo's power is on a completely different level than any other fighter Jermall's ever faced before, and Jermall's just way too hittable.
Jermall Charlo does not have the boxing pedigree of a Danny Jacobs, and definitely not of a Caleb Plant.
I actually would disagree a little bit with the Danny Jacobs, and a lot of people would be surprised at what he just said there, but I somewhat agree. I at least agree with the Caleb Plant. He doesn't have the slickness and the defensive responsibility and the feet of a Caleb Plant. No, he doesn't have that. But Jermall Charlo, just because of his power, he may have more of a chance to at least survive against, say, Canelo Alvarez. But do I see him beating Canelo? It's possible. Anything's possible. But like I said, at the most, I give him a 30% chance. This is what I've been saying in Chronicles of Judah 144. This is a very logical and objective dude. This is the same shit that I've been saying for the past year and a half. The same shit that I've been saying. Jermall Charlo is not on a completely whole nother level compared to Caleb Plant or or any of these guys that Canelo's been recently been facing. I don't even know if he's above those guys. It just is what it is.
But he does bring his own potentialities into a fight against Canelo where he can possibly hurt a Canelo. Canelo is yet to fight a great all-around fighter who has many different things that he brings to the table aside from a Mayweather. Because he just didn't respect Plant's, his power.
I somewhat get what you're saying there when it comes down, but what I will say is this. He does have a great resume. And Gennady Golovkin, although I wouldn't say that he fights extremely well on the back foot, he can do somewhat of a multitude of things. Lara, although he's a primarily defensive fighter, he can do a multitude of things. Now, of course, a couple of those fights were controversial. But Canelo still was able to get out at the end of the day, and he's fought just so many styles. But the problem is that, I just don't see any ones around there that that are as multi-dimensional as the Floyd Mayweather Jr. That's why I say when so many people say that, oh, Jamal Charlo, he's going to be, he's the best jabber, he's the best multi-dimensional fighter that Canelo's ever going to face ever since, Mayweather. Like, it's like, dude, what are you talking about? Jamal Charlo, he can't do a great multitude of things. He's not the fighter of what a prime GGG was. He's not the fighter of what a prime Araceli Lara was. Once again, if I'm wrong, I have no problem eating my crow. I have no problem being proven wrong, especially if I'm pleasantly surprised. And if Jamal Charlo was actually able to come out on top against Canelo Alvarez, that would be a pleasant surprise. Not saying that I'm rooting against Canelo Alvarez, of course, but just saying all in all that I'd be like, wow, Jamal Charlo was actually able to pull it off. But like I said, I just don't see it.
Plant had the boxing skills to potentially outbox a Canelo, but number one, he didn't believe in his power, and Canelo didn't believe in his power. So the first thing that he had to do is make Canelo respect his power, and he was too scared to do that, unfortunately for him.
I agree.
Or maybe his corner didn't direct him.
And to be honest with you, Caleb Plant, although he was talking all that fluff and muff, I don't think that he even believed it from the get-go, because Caleb Plant was even fighting a little bit too defensive from the get-go. He was staying in the corner way, way, way too long.
Appropriately, because his corner man seemed scared as well. His trainer seemed scared heading into the fight. And heading into a fight like that, your trainer has to be very confident in his own abilities to establish a game plan to defeat a fighter on that level.
I agree. Your trainer has to be A grade. And on top of that, when the fighter does not have confidence, it's basically overall if you have a son or a daughter. Sometimes if your son or daughter overall does not have enough confidence in themselves, you have to establish confidence within them by basically saying, hey, you can do it. You can do it. Let's figure things out. We can do it this way. We can do it this way. At the end of the day, you have to be that person's rock. The trainer at the end of the day has to be the fighter's rock. He has to be that fighter's foundation. And if I didn't really notice that personally myself. Maybe that's a good catch by Judah there. But if his trainer did seem scared, that was an even bigger fuck up for Caleb Plant.
Because if your trainer's not confident, it's going to show in the game plan. And I think that the trainer did not believe that Caleb could hurt Canelo. And that's why he had him moving too much. Move way too much. Caleb did not go to the...
I actually don't think that Caleb Plant's movement was a big problem. The problem was, in my opinion, well, you don't want to move all in all. You don't just want to, run around the whole entire time. But what you do want to do all in all is that, being on the back foot, in my opinion, is not a bad thing. But you're going to have to try to back up the opponent here and there. That all in all, and get off the goddamn ropes. Like I said, Caleb Plant was on the ropes way too goddamn much. It's like, come on, man. You're not a Floyd Mayweather Jr. You're not as defensively responsible as him. You're not as quick as him. It just is what it is.
Body enough. He didn't shoot enough jabs to the body. With a fighter who punches as hard as Canelo, Caleb had to make a committed body attack. He refused to do so. Instead, it was Canelo going hard to the body. He dissipated whatever power Caleb may have had by the middle of the fight. And basically, after a while, it was only a matter of time. I would love to see Canelo square up against Benavidez. That would be a tremendous fight for I belong at last. Benavidez is very talented, but he does not have good footwork, so most likely that fight's not going to go past 4 or 5 rounds. If Canelo...
That's crazy, man. In my opinion, actually, David Benavidez, I think that he actually would last for a bit, but if that fight were to happen, and I've already said this multiple times, I think that Canelo more than likely would beat him. Benavidez is a good fighter. He is. He's speedy. He's got decent power, but not great power. Like I said, it's not really on the A grade level, in my opinion. He's a person that, like I said, he's like the Max Holloway of boxing. A person that has multiple flaws, but if you catch him on a very, very good night, he's going to be very tough to defeat. But David Benavidez, at least when you compare him to a Canelo, I don't see it. His defensive responsibility isn't there. He doesn't have the same chin of, say, like a Canelo or Gennady Golovkin. He can be hurt. He can be knocked down. I think that the fight would go past 4 or 5 rounds. But Canelo Alvarez, in my opinion, he more than likely would dominate him.
When Benavidez ever square off. Benavidez is fighting tonight against a fighter named Kyron Davis. We'll see how that goes. Jamal Charlo has already stated, I don't think that he has a real chance. I would love to see...
Damn. Listen to what Judah just said. I don't think Jamal Charlo has a real chance. Shit. In my opinion, like I said, Jamal Charlo, he has about a 30% chance. But like I said, that's why I say Caleb Plant, Billy Joe Saunders, Danny Jacobs, Callum Smith, all these guys, they come off the assembly line. They don't all have the same styles, but they're pretty much all in that same league. That's what I'm saying. Unless we're talking about an Artur Beterbiev or Dmitry Bivol, there's no other fighter on the planet Earth, unless we're talking about the cruiserweights, a legitimate cruiserweight that's highly skilled, probably like an Alexander Usyk, that has more than a 50% chance against Canelo. Jamal Charlo, Demetrius Bubu Andrade, David Benavidez, those fighters don't have a greater chance than any of the fighters that Canelo's just recently fought, unless we're talking about Avni Yildirim or Rocky Fielding. But Billy Joe Saunders, Caleb Plant, they're pretty much on that level.
Canelo against Bubu Andrade. I think that Bubu could offer some difficulties for Canelo. I will say this, in Bubu's last fight, he did show a bit of age. He got knocked down against...
Well, did he really show age, or did he really just show what he's always been? It just is what it is. Judah, in my opinion, he's actually overrated Demetrius Andrade a little bit too much, in my opinion, as well. He said that he got knocked down against the British fighter, I believe, Liam Williams. Actually, no, I don't believe that he got knocked down, but he did get hurt multiple times. But like I said, Demetrius Andrade, good fighter. Great fighter? No. I've never seen Demetrius Andrade on that level. Like I said, there's been so many people that always hype this dude up. I don't know what fight they ever seen in Demetrius Bubu Andrade. I guess that I've just missed it. But people have always ranked this dude on such a high level. And whenever I've watched him box, I've just never seen it. Like I said, it's like that one quote that the old, the older comedian who unfortunately passed away, a while ago, Patrice O'Neill, what he said overall about Jeff Ross, another stand-up comedian. Everyone always says about how legendary your stand-up is when it comes down to it. It's like the Loch Ness Monster. Everyone says how amazing and how legendary it is, but I've never seen it in person. Like, you know what I mean? Demetrius Andrade, everyone always talks about how great this dude is, but every time that I've seen his content, every time that I've seen him box, I'm always like, I've seen better. Like I said, a primary Sonny Lara, in my opinion, he's pretty much like a better, more defensive, faster version of Demetrius Bubu Andrade. And for those of you overall that like to circle jerk about the amateurs, Lara was able to beat Demetrius Andrade in the amateurs.
The European fight.
And that's with Demetrius Andrade having a 73-inch reach overall and being 6'2".
So Bubu may be past it. Who knows? It was interesting heading into the fight. I saw an interview that Caleb Plant had where they asked him had he spoke to Floyd Mayweather about Canelo Alvarez. And all these fighters always say the same thing. Well, yeah, we shared a couple of words. In other words, Floyd didn't tell you shit. Because Floyd...
In other words, Floyd didn't tell you shit. Damn.
They don't really believe that you had a chance to beat Canelo. That's why Floyd wasn't going to say anything to you. Plus, Floyd didn't want to waste time talking to you, and then you still go ahead and lose. Floyd never thought that Caleb Plant was going to beat Canelo. Canelo's an all-time great fighter.
I agree, sir. Thank you for saying that. And once again, I'm not saying this as a sole Canelo Alvarez fanboy, but like I said, go ahead and take a look at these channels. Dante's Boxing Nation. So many of these other dumbass channels when they have a clear agenda. Canelo's not an all-time great fighter, when it comes down to it. He doesn't even deserve to be on the pound-for-pound list. All this stupid bullshit. You can tell when you take a look at Canelo, he's an all-time great fighter. Like, just stop, man.
Where does he rank now on the all-time list? Is he top 10 all-time? I'm not quite sure about that. I think that all-time lists are subjective, obviously, because you have different eras. I did a video about Canelo a long time ago, a few months ago.
My lists usually are different than other people's. Not so different to the point to where it seems so off. But like I said, my list may be... Skill is very, very important in my opinion. So if you have someone that accomplished things very, very highly, like a Floyd Mayweather Jr., and if you want to talk about him debatably as the most skilled fighter of all time and rank him as the greatest of all time, I don't have a problem with that. But, a lot of people like Judah, for example, he's going to state it overall within the next few minutes. He actually believes... that Salvador Sanchez, in terms of skills, is actually above Canelo Alvarez. Maybe he was. I don't know. I haven't really watched a lot of Salvador Sanchez. I believe Sanchez was a fighter from like the 70s, 80s onwards, but I would have to remember. I never really watched a lot of Salvador Sanchez, but I would have to watch him personally. I've always heard that he was highly skilled. A certain amount of my commentators have told me that as well, and I thank you all for that. I'll have to watch him. But when it comes down to it all in all, I may even do a reaction video one day watching his highlights. I'm not sure. Let me know if y'all be interested in that. But when it comes down to it, what I will say is this. Canelo, at least just in terms of not watching Salvador Sanchez, he's probably the most skilled Mexican fighter that I've personally ever seen.
Where he ranks...
Even more than Chavez Sr.
as the all-time great Mexican fighters. I had him number 2 on my list, even from before this fight, right behind Salvador Sanchez. And only because Salvador Sanchez, in my view, is the most skilled fighter I've ever seen other than Floyd Mayweather and maybe Ray Robinson. To me, you could take Salvador Sanchez, Ray Robinson, and Floyd Mayweather, throw all 3 of their names into a bag, and whoever you pull out, you can pull out. To me, they're all on the same level skill-wise.
That's pretty crazy. I haven't watched a whole lot of Sugar Ray Robinson either. I would have to watch Salvador Sanchez. Like I said, I don't think I've ever heard anyone compare Salvador Sanchez to Floyd Mayweather Jr. or what's his name, Sugar Ray Robinson before. That's pretty crazy.
Maybe giving Mayweather a slight...
But Salvador Sanchez, even if he was on that level, I just can't have him on that level because unfortunately I believe he passed away very early and he just didn't accomplish that much. So even if you're so highly skilled, I just can't have you on an extremely high level if I don't think that you're more accomplished. So for example, Canelo's like, what, a 4-weight division champion? So in my opinion, Canelo, he would have to be above Salvador Sanchez. It just is what it is. And so does Chavez Sr. in my opinion. Even if you do believe that Salvador Sanchez was levels in terms of skill, above them. Salvador Sanchez, I think he was like, what, a 1-2-weight division champion. Back then, that was probably pretty good. I think actually he was only a 1-weight division champion. The biggest win of his career, of course, was against that one undefeated Puerto Rican fighter. But when it comes down to it all in all, Salvador Sanchez, great fighter. I just don't know if I can quite have him on the Chavez Sr. or Canelo level.
Edge over the other 2 because of his the diversity of his abilities and skills, both offensively and defensively. And of course, you have the great Pernell Whitaker, but Pernell I wouldn't quite put on the level of a Floyd Mayweather. I'm sure.
No, Pernell Whitaker is not on their level. Pernell has to be about a level below. Pernell may be able to sneak into my top 10 of all time, but he's probably more top 20.
Some of you out there will disagree with that. But I would give Floyd a slight edge over Pernell. Now,
I would give him a decent edge.
Comes to Canelo, once again, in my view, he's right behind Salvador Sanchez. I put him ahead of Chavez. I put him ahead of Barrera and Morales and a lot of these other guys. Marquez.
He's certainly above Marquez, Barrera, and Morales. There's no debate about that. These people can try to debate that. Like I said, there's a reason why those guys are acting a bunch of salty-ass fish from the ocean, bunch of salty-ass hoes. There's a reason why they're acting like that, because they know that Canelo surpassed them. They know that. That's why they're bitching and complaining about Canelo constantly. Oh, he doesn't fight the real fighters. Oh, he doesn't fight that. Just shut up. Shut up. Go back to your home in Mexico when it comes down to, and enjoy retirement. Ain't nobody want to hear anything from your salty ass. It just is what it is.
Marquez, to me, is one of the most underrated fighters of all time.
It's like when I hear Larry Holmes overall, talk about the heavyweights today. Oh, well, they ain't got no skills. They ain't got this. It's just like, whatever, Larry. Sit your 65-year-old ass down and go home and enjoy retirement. All right? Anyway.
Lopez as well, Ricardo Lopez. I put Canelo ahead of him. But Marquez is one of the most underrated fighters of all time. To me, he's right there with Pacquiao. To me, they're...
No. Can't agree with that one. Sorry. Now, if you're talking about in terms of skill... Marquez, of course, was able to give Manny Pacquiao a very big run for his money, but just in terms of accomplishment, no way. Marquez cannot be on that same level. Just is what it is. Manny Pacquiao is an 8-weight division champion. He's a person that was able to defeat Miguel Cotto. He was a person that was able to defeat Keith Thurman when he was 41 years old. Do you think Marquez, even at his best, would have been able to do that? I'm not so sure about that. He was a person that got embarrassed by Timothy Bradley. I thought Manny Pacquiao was able to dominate Timothy Bradley in all 3 fights. But of course, styles make fights. Marquez is a great fighter, but no, he's nowhere near close to that Manny Pacquiao level, in my opinion. In terms of skills, great fighter. But accomplishments, no. 4-weight division champion, I believe. Maybe even a 5-weight division champion. I have to take a look at it. I think he's a 4-weight division champion, but I could be wrong. But Marquez, no. Not on that level. Marquez is probably on that same level as, I would say, about a Miguel Cotto.
They're right on the same level. Anybody saying that Pacquiao is a top 3 fighter of all time, then you have to have Marquez there as well.
No, you don't. Sorry. I really don't understand that mentality. Marquez has lost several fights in his career. Now, of course, Manny Pacquiao has as well. But when you take a look at it, one was to Jeff Horn. I think Manny Pacquiao kind of underestimated him a little bit in that fight. Another one that he lost, of course, was the 4th fight to Marquez, but it is what it is. He won the other 2. Although some of them you can debate were a bit controversial, but it is what it is. Manny Pacquiao was able to knock out Marco Antonio Barrera. He was able to knock out Eric Morales twice when it came down to... Now, Marquez, I believe, was also able to beat Barrera, at least. I don't know if he ever fought Morales. Someone let me know on that. But when it comes down to it, Marquez, great fighter. On the same level as Pacquiao, not quite.
Because Marquez is right on the level with Pacquiao. But overall, very good fight. Very entertaining fight.
Because to allege that, then you would also have to allege, in my opinion, that Marquez, that he would have beat fighters like Miguel Cotto or Keith Thurman, in my opinion, or, yada, 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 yada. Marquez was great fighter. Great fighter, but on the same level as Pacquiao, I don't think that I can allege that.
Canelo is a great watch because you're going to see great skills and also power. He's also going to try to put the foot on the gas late in the fight. Everybody knows that he's searching for the knockout. Do I think eventually, even though he runs the sport, that he might get caught once again using PEDs?
What did he just say there? That Canelo Alvarez runs the sport. I've been saying that for a very long time. Like I said, for those of us overall that are realistic and objective, we know what's up.
It's a possibility. And I'm not trying to rain on his parade, but at the end of the day, if a person cheats once, they're going to keep cheating. It's just a matter of refining the process so that you don't get caught.
I agree with that. Is there a likelihood that Canelo's on PEDs? Absolutely. But like I said, to me, that's just not a big deal. A lot of people all know they may disagree with that. You can maybe say that that affects his status in terms of GOAT conversations. But, I don't know. Like I said, if I were to go to UFC, John Jones, he's been caught on steroids like 17 goddamn times. I wouldn't say that John Jones is not an all-time great fighter and debatably in the GOAT conversation just because he took steroids. Maybe you can argue some people over him because maybe some of those guys were never caught on steroids, like a George St. Pierre or, some other people. Now, of course, Anderson Silva, he at one point in time was caught on PEDs, but it is what it is. But, like I said, the PED argument to me is
I'm not someone who believes that a fighter who has conditioning issues all of a sudden becomes better at his conditioning as he gets older. Normally, you reach the peak of your conditioning in your early to mid-20s. Fighters don't get more in condition in their early 30s. So we'll see what
I would agree with that.
happens with Canelo.
But what I will say is this, once again, I do believe that he does pace himself better in fights.
But just in regards to skills, he's as skilled a Mexican fighter as I've ever seen other than Salvador Sanchez. Great hybrid fighter who's been able to combine some of the skill set of Floyd Mayweather and other great fighters, including Mexican fighters, but also he fights in a semi-black style, Canelo does. That's why he gets a lot of respect from, the various demographics who watch boxing.
I agree with that. And what I'll say is this, if you're going to be an all-time great in boxing, you have to have a multitude of these attributes. You have to have great head movement. You more than likely all have to have decent power when it comes down to it. You have to be a decent athlete. More than likely, very good feet. Now, Canelo, he's never really been known for having the best of feet compared to some other all-time greats, but it's good enough when it comes down to it. It gets him by. I wouldn't compare it to a Floyd Mayweather Jr. necessarily, but it's good enough to the point to where overall, it just gets him through. It just is what it is. On top of that, you probably also have to have a very decent chin. Or, certain people, they can just get by being tremendous athletes. But Canelo is one of those dudes to where not only is he a tremendous athlete, but he just has it all. He's a person that's just a very naturally, very intelligent, and very overly skilled boxer. And that's why I don't see him getting beat in a lot of these fights.
He is an all-time great, no doubt about it.
I agree.
But anyway, once again, great fight. Peace.
But anyways, just thought that I would review that video. That was Mr. Judah's analyzation of the Caleb Plant versus Canelo Alvarez fight. I just thought that I would review that. That's probably going to be the only video that I overall tend to review of Judas, at least at the current moment in time, especially from Patreon, because, of course, I don't want to be reviewing a lot of Patreon videos because, of course, that's meant to be paid for. But it is what it is. But anyways, that's really about it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you thought on it, and I'll talk to you all later.